The darkened office cast long shadows across Dr. Victor Kenzo's face as he sat transfixed before his laptop screen. The footage played silently. Elegant women entering his private consultation room, each wearing a different expression of trust. There was Mrs. Mutesa, the hospital administrator's wife, her usually confident demeanor softened by vulnerability. Then came Amara, the school principal's daughter, her youth evident in her nervous gestures. The images continued: the local council chairman's wife, 3 prominent businesswomen, the newly married teacher from the international school. Each video clip was meticulously labeled, dated, and stored in encrypted files that had become his most prized possession. A quiet knock interrupted his viewing. "Victor?" His wife's voice carried through the door. "Are you coming to bed?" "Just reviewing some patient files, darling," he called back, quickly minimizing the window. If only she knew that among those files was footage of her closest friend, taken just that afternoon. Dr. Kenzo smiled in the darkness, remembering how it had all begun 3 months ago when he first arrived in Makonde. The morning sun painted Makonde's skyline in hues of gold and amber as Dr. Victor Kenzo's Mercedes wound through the city's bustling streets. Modern high-rises stood alongside traditional markets, embodying the blend of old and new that characterized this rapidly growing African metropolis. His destination was Makonde Central Hospital, where he would begin his tenure as the new chief of women's health services. Dr. Kenzo adjusted his Italian silk tie in the rearview mirror. At 35, he cut an impressive figure, tall, well-dressed, with a gentle smile that put patients at ease immediately. His credentials were impeccable: top of his class at medical school, specialized training abroad, and a string of successful community health initiatives in other cities. What his gleaming resume didn't show was his carefully hidden obsession with power and control. The hospital administrator, Dr. Mutesa, greeted him warmly. "Dr. Kenzo, your arrival is an answer to our prayers. Our women's health statistics are alarming, and we need someone who can bridge the gap between modern medicine and our traditional communities." Kenzo nodded solemnly. "I understand the challenges, Dr. Mutesa. Women often feel uncomfortable discussing intimate health issues. My approach combines medical expertise with cultural sensitivity." He paused thoughtfully. "I've found that building trust is essential." What he didn't mention was how he planned to exploit that trust. Already, his trained eye had noted Mrs. Mutesa's designer handbag in her husband's office, the fresh flowers on the desk, signs of a woman who valued luxury and attention. The tour of the hospital revealed exactly what Kenzo had anticipated: outdated equipment, overworked staff, and a desperate need for modernization. Perfect conditions for his plans. "I'll need to set up a private consultation room," he said. "Many women prefer absolute privacy for sensitive discussions." Dr. Mutesa agreed readily. Of course. We'll convert the old administrative office on the 3rd floor. It's secluded and has its own bathroom." He didn't notice Kenzo's slight smile at the mention of seclusion. Within a week, Kenzo had transformed the space into a sophisticated sanctuary. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, and state-of-the-art medical equipment created an atmosphere of professionalism and comfort. Hidden within the elegant decor were several tiny cameras, their lenses disguised as innocent wall fixtures. His first target was carefully chosen: Sarah Mutesa herself. He knew the hospital gossip. She was younger than her husband by 15 years, a former beauty queen who now channeled her energy into charity work. More importantly, she was influential in Makonde social circles. The opportunity came during a hospital fundraising gala. Sarah stood alone by the refreshments, elegant in a fitted red dress. Kenzo approached with 2 glasses of champagne. "Mrs. Mutesa," he said, offering her a glass, "your work with the hospital charity is remarkable. She smiled, pleased by his attention. "Please call me Sarah. And thank you. Though lately I've been having trouble sleeping. This stress." Kenzo's expression shifted to professional concern. "Insomnia can have many underlying causes. Perhaps you should come for a consultation. We could discuss holistic treatment options." The next day, Sarah Mutesa became his first private patient and his first recording. As she confided her frustrations about her marriage, her aging anxiety, her need for validation, Kenzo listened with seemingly genuine empathy. The hidden cameras captured every vulnerable moment. Their sessions continued, each one documented meticulously. Sarah bloomed under his attention, her renewed confidence noticed by everyone, especially other women in her social circle. Soon they too began seeking appointments with the charming Dr. Kenzo. Among them was Amara Okoro, the 19-year-old daughter of Emmanuel Okoro, the city's most prestigious private school principal. Fresh from her first year of university, she came seeking birth control advice. Kenzo saw something familiar in her eyes, a desire to be seen as mature, sophisticated. It was almost too easy. By the end of his first month, Kenzo had compiled an impressive collection of recordings featuring some of Makonde's most prominent women. Each video represented a carefully orchestrated seduction, built on his understanding of their individual vulnerabilities. Some sought escape from loveless marriages, others craved the excitement of forbidden romance, and a few simply surrendered to his practiced charm. But it was his wife's best friend, Isabella, who would unknowingly set in motion the events that would ultimately lead to his undoing. Isabella Adebayo carried herself with the confidence of someone who had everything under control. As the CEO of a successful tech startup and a mother of two, she managed her life with precision and grace. But Dr. Kenzo saw what others missed: the slight tremor in her hands during social gatherings, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. During one of his wife's dinner parties, Kenzo observed Isabella declining a glass of wine, her hand unconsciously touching her midsection. His medical instincts, honed by years of observation, noted other subtle signs: the slight pallor of her skin, the barely noticeable swelling of her ankles. "Isabella," he said quietly, catching her alone in the kitchen. "Forgive my directness, but as a medical professional, I notice things. Are you feeling well?" Her composure cracked slightly. I've been meaning to see a doctor," she admitted. "But with my position, discretion is essential. The board members are conservative, and if they knew..." Kenzo smiled sympathetically. "My private consultation room at the hospital is completely confidential. No one needs to know." The next day, Isabella became his most significant recording yet. Her situation was complex: an unplanned pregnancy with her young assistant, a marriage already strained by her career success, and a corporate merger hanging in the balance. The cameras captured every tear, every confession, every moment of vulnerability. As his collection grew, so did Kenzo's influence in Makonde's social circles. Women left his office feeling understood, valued, and mysteriously drawn to him. His wife, Amara, noticed the change in her friends. "You've helped so many people," she said proudly one evening. Even Isabella seems happier lately. But success made Kenzo bolder. He began taking risks, pursuing more challenging targets. The wife of the hospital board chairman, Mrs. Grace Okonjo, caught his attention. A devout woman known for her conservative values and unwavering moral stance. The challenge excited him, and he meticulously planned his approach. Meanwhile, Isabella's situation grew more complicated. Her young assistant, Marcus, began demanding more attention, threatening to expose their relationship to the board. During an emergency consultation, Isabella broke down completely. "He's becoming unstable," she confided, unaware of the cameras recording her distress. He says if I don't leave my husband, he'll send evidence to everyone. Kenzo saw an opportunity. Perhaps I could speak with him, he offered smoothly. As a medical professional, I might be able to help him understand the delicacy of the situation. What Isabella didn't know was that Kenzo planned to add Marcus to his web of manipulation. The meeting with Marcus took place in a private room at an upscale restaurant. The young man arrived nervous but defiant, his designer clothes betraying his attempt to project sophistication. Kenzo had already reviewed his background thoroughly. Ambitious, from a modest family, desperate to climb the social ladder. You're playing a dangerous game, Kenzo said quietly, after ordering expensive wine. Isabella is not just any CEO. Her connections run deep in this city. Marcus straightened his shoulders. I love her. She promised we'd be together. Kenzo smiled, the same smile that had disarmed countless patients. Love? Let's be honest, Marcus. You saw an opportunity, a successful, vulnerable woman, but you overplayed your hand. He paused, letting the words sink in. However, I might have a proposition that could benefit us both. By the end of the evening, Marcus had agreed to become Kenzo's informant, feeding him information about Isabella's corporate activities and personal vulnerabilities. In exchange, Kenzo promised to manage the situation and provide him with opportunities to meet other influential women. The network grew more complex. Mrs. Okonjo, the board chairman's wife, finally scheduled a consultation after Kenzo orchestrated a chance meeting at a charity function. Her initial resistance made her eventual trust even more satisfying to him. The cameras captured her transformation from reluctant patient to willing participant in his game. But it was an unexpected development with Amara, the school principal's daughter, that threatened to shatter everything. During a routine follow-up appointment, she revealed she was pregnant. I can't tell my father, she sobbed. He'll never forgive me. The cameras whirred silently, recording her breakdown. Kenzo maintained his composed facade, but internally, he calculated risks. A pregnant student, the daughter of a prominent educator, could attract unwanted attention. We'll handle this discreetly, he assured her, already planning how to use this situation to his advantage. Unknown to him, Dr. Mutesa had begun noticing patterns. The increasing number of private consultations, the changed behavior of his wife, Sarah, the whispered conversations that stopped when he entered rooms. As hospital administrator, he had access to scheduling records, and the frequency of certain patients' visits raised questions. One evening, while reviewing hospital security footage for an unrelated matter, Dr. Mutesa noticed something odd. The timestamp on Kenzo's consultation room showed appointments running late into the night, well past normal hours. More concerning were the women he recognized entering, all connected to powerful men in Makonde. Isabella's situation reached a breaking point when her husband discovered suspicious messages on her phone. In a panic, she rushed to Kenzo's office after hours. The cameras recorded her pacing. Mascara streaked across her cheeks. Everything's falling apart, she cried. Marcus is threatening to go to the media. My husband knows something's wrong, and the merger... She collapsed into a chair, her usual poise shattered. Kenzo saw an opportunity in her crisis. Perhaps it's time to consider a more permanent solution to our problems, he suggested carefully. The cameras caught his calculated expression as he outlined a plan that would bind her to him even more tightly. Meanwhile, Sarah Mutesa had begun piecing together fragments of conversations overheard at social gatherings. Her initial gratitude toward Kenzo was turning to unease as she recognized similar changes in other women who visited him. The way they deferred to him, the secret glances, the subtle changes in their relationships with their families, it all formed a pattern she couldn't ignore. Dr. Mutesa sat in his darkened office long after midnight. the glow of his computer screen illuminating his troubled face. The security footage from the hospital corridors played before him, showing a pattern he could no longer ignore. He had spent weeks gathering information, carefully noting the times, dates, and names of women who visited Kenzo's private consultation room. The list was disturbing. Sarah, his own wife, appeared multiple times, often staying for hours. Isabella Adebayo's visits had increased dramatically in recent weeks. Mrs. Okonjo, despite her public stance against modern medical practices, had become a regular visitor. And most troublingly, young Amara Okoro's appointments seemed to coincide with her sudden withdrawal from university. His investigation took an unexpected turn when a junior IT technician reported unusual network activity from Kenzo's office. "There's heavy data uploading almost every evening, sir," the technician explained. "The bandwidth usage suggests video files." Meanwhile, Marcus's role as informant had evolved. Kenzo now used him to gather compromising information about other potential targets. The young man's ambition made him an eager accomplice, though he remained unaware of the full scope of Kenzo's operations. "The CEO of Unity Bank's wife has been asking about appointments," Marcus reported during one of their meetings. "She's having problems with her marriage, and after I mentioned your discretion, she seemed very interested." Kenzo rewarded Marcus with introductions to influential women, carefully manipulating both sides for his benefit. The cameras in his office captured every meeting, every conversation, adding to his growing archive of secrets. But the weight of these secrets was beginning to show. Sarah Mutesa, once enthusiastically compliant, started asking uncomfortable questions. During one recorded session, she confronted him. "I've been talking to other women, Victor. We've all noticed patterns in your behavior. The way you guide us toward certain decisions." Kenzo maintained his composure, but internally, he recognized the threat. Sarah knew too much, had observed too carefully. She had to be managed differently now. "Perhaps we should discuss your concerns privately," he suggested, already planning how to use her husband's position as leverage. The situation with Amara grew more complex. Her pregnancy was advancing, and the school principal's daughter could no longer hide her condition. She started making demands, threatening to expose everything to her father. "You promised to help me," she cried during one recorded session. "Instead, you've trapped me." Isabella's corporate merger hung by a thread. Her board of directors had scheduled a crucial vote, but rumors about her personal life threatened to derail everything. In desperation, she turned to Kenzo, unaware that he had orchestrated the crisis through Marcus's careful manipulation of information. "I need those recordings destroyed," she demanded. "All of them. My entire career, my family's reputation, everything depends on this merger." Kenzo saw an opportunity to tighten his control. "Perhaps we could arrange something," he suggested smoothly. "Your position after the merger could be very influential. And influence, as we both know, can be mutually beneficial." But he had underestimated Isabella's desperation. After leaving his office, she made a decision that would set in motion the final act of his carefully constructed drama. She contacted Sarah Mutesa. The two women met in a quiet cafe across town. Their conversation, though hushed, was intense. Sarah shared her suspicions about Kenzo's manipulation, while Isabella revealed the existence of the recordings. Together, they began to understand the full scope of his deception. Dr. Mutesa's investigation reached a critical point when he discovered the hidden cameras in Kenzo's consultation room. The revelation hit him like a physical blow, not just because of the breach of medical ethics, but because he finally understood what had happened to his wife. As these threads began to converge, Mrs. Okonjo made an unexpected move. During a hospital board meeting, she raised concerns about the unusually high number of private consultations in the women's health department. Her husband, the board chairman, took notice. Questions were asked. Records were requested. Kenzo sensed the shifting dynamics, but remained confident in his position. His archive of recordings gave him leverage over too many powerful people. Or so he thought, until he received an anonymous email containing footage from his own office. Someone had been watching the watcher. The final unraveling began on a warm Tuesday evening. Kenzo was reviewing his latest recordings when his office door opened without warning. Sarah Mutesa entered, followed by Isabella, Mrs. Okonjo, and Amara. Behind them stood Dr. Mutesa and the board chairman. The room crackled with tension. "What's the meaning of this?" Kenzo asked, quickly closing his laptop. But Sarah stepped forward and opened it again. The screen illuminated, showing footage from his own consultation room. "We know everything, Victor," Sarah said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "The recordings, the manipulation, the way you've been playing us against each other." Isabella moved to stand beside her. "Did you think we wouldn't eventually talk to each other? Compare notes? Notice the patterns?" Her corporate training showed in her controlled anger. "My board meeting tomorrow. You orchestrated the whole crisis through Marcus, didn't you?" Kenzo's composed facade began to crack. His eyes darted between the faces before him, calculating possibilities, searching for weaknesses he could exploit. But something had changed. The women who stood before him were no longer the vulnerable targets he had manipulated so carefully. Dr. Mutesa stepped forward, placing a thick folder on the desk. "We've documented everything. The unauthorized recordings, the ethical violations, the manipulation of patient trust." He paused, his professional demeanor masking his personal pain. "The police are already examining the evidence." "Evidence?" Kenzo scoffed, attempting to regain control. "You mean confidential patient records? Medical discussions protected by doctor-patient privilege? You're all complicit now. Think about your reputations, your families, your positions in society." Mrs. Okonjo spoke up, her voice carrying the weight of her social standing. "Our reputations? You underestimate the strength of women who have nothing left to lose. We've already spoken to our families, our husbands. The truth may hurt, but deception poisons everything it touches." Young Amara moved into the light, one hand protectively over her pregnant belly. "My father knows everything now. About the baby. About how you used my vulnerability to manipulate me." Her voice grew stronger. "He's not ashamed of me. He's angry at how you abused your position of trust." The door opened again. Marcus entered, escorted by 2 police officers. His expensive suit couldn't hide his defeated posture. "I've given them everything, Dr. Kenzo," he said quietly. "The instructions you gave me, the information you wanted me to gather, how you used me to manipulate Mrs. Adebayo's corporate situation." Kenzo's world began to collapse around him. Each person in the room represented a carefully constructed manipulation, a string in his web of control. Now those strings were unraveling, tangling around him instead. Sarah stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Your wife is waiting at home. She knows everything too." Isabella showed her the footage you took of her best friend. "She's packing her bags as we speak." The mention of his wife broke something in Kenzo. His carefully maintained control shattered. He lunged for his laptop, desperate to destroy the evidence. But the police officers moved swiftly. In moments, he was restrained, his protests echoing through the hospital corridors. As he was led away, Dr. Mutesa addressed the gathered group. "The hospital board has called an emergency meeting. We'll need statements from all of you, but we'll handle this with the utmost discretion." Isabella nodded, her business acumen surfacing. "I've already spoken with my board. We're prepared to handle any publicity. Sometimes, bringing darkness into light is the only way to heal. The aftermath unfolded over the following weeks. The hospital implemented strict new protocols for patient privacy. Dr. Mutesa established a support group for the affected women, creating a safe space for healing and recovery. Sarah found strength in helping others rebuild their trust. She channeled her experience into establishing a women's advocacy program at the hospital, ensuring that patient vulnerabilities would never again be exploited. Isabella's board stood behind her when the story broke. Her honesty in coming forward earned her respect, and the merger proceeded successfully. She used her position to implement corporate policies protecting employees from manipulation and abuse. Amara gave birth to a healthy baby girl, supported by her father and their community. She returned to university, more determined than ever to succeed, her experience fueling her desire to study law and protect others from exploitation. Mrs. Okonjo worked with her husband to establish a foundation supporting ethical medical practices and patient advocacy. Their influence helped create new legislation strengthening patient privacy protections across the region. Marcus served a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation. His testimony proved crucial in building the case against Kenzo, whose trial revealed the full extent of his manipulation. The recordings were sealed by court order, protecting the privacy of the women involved. But their stories, carefully anonymized, became part of training programs for medical professionals, teaching the importance of maintaining ethical boundaries and respecting patient trust. 1 year later, Sarah stood before a group of medical students at Makonde Teaching Hospital. Trust, she began, is both the most valuable and the most vulnerable thing we possess. As healthcare providers, you will be given trust freely by those seeking help. How you honor that trust will define not just your careers, but your humanity. In her audience sat Amara, now a law student, her daughter healthy and growing. Isabella, taking a break from corporate negotiations to support her friend. Mrs. Okonjo, whose foundation now sponsored scholarships for ethical medical practice. Each woman carried scars from their experience, but also strength, wisdom, and an unshakable commitment to protecting others from similar exploitation. Dr. Mutesa, sitting in the back of the lecture hall, watched with pride as Sarah concluded her presentation. The hospital had emerged stronger from the crisis, its commitment to patient care and ethical practice deeper than ever. In a maximum security prison outside the city, Dr. Victor Kenzo sat alone in his cell, his medical license revoked, his reputation destroyed, his marriage ended. He had lost everything. Yet even now, he didn't fully understand how his carefully constructed web of control had collapsed so completely. The answer lay in something he had never truly understood: the resilience of the human spirit, the strength found in unity, and the healing power of truth. His victims had transformed their pain into purpose, their shame into strength, their isolation into community. As the sun set over Makonde, casting long shadows across the hospital grounds, Sarah Mutesa stood at her office window. The Women's Advocacy Center below buzzed with activity, a testament to how light could emerge from darkness, how healing could come from harm, how trust, once broken, could be rebuilt into something stronger than before.